I appreciate the notion of agency, that we're not bystanders in the world. It's decisions, not conditions, that determine our fate and future. And that fundamental notion of agency, I think, is important more broadly. And I think that goes to some of the issues around, victimization. And I see a lot of that, respectively, on the right, increasingly, even with Trump often approaching things from that sort of mindset.
What do you mean? What do you mean for Trump?
I think there's sort of the grievance.
What I saw.
Yeah.
What it looked to me like he was negotiating with a deaf prostitute.
The political pressure cooker just blew apart, and Gavin Newsom didn't simply respond. He erupted after Tyrus pulled the pin on a moment no one expected. What followed was outrage, frantic cleanup, and a reaction sharp enough to scorch the entire set. If you thought political drama had reached its limit, this went further. It twisted, spiraled, and left everyone glued to their screens, wondering one unsettling question. Stay right here. The wildest turn is still ahead today.
Well, it's not his words when he speaks.
Yeah.
You have to watch him closely. And some genius decided not to film him any lower than the shoulder.
Yes, did you? Yes.
So what did he do?
You couldn't see the hands.
No, but he sent Morse code.
Yes.
Go back and watch it. Look at the blinking. Blink, look. Meet me at the house. Like, he's blinking. He's sending... I'm getting there. Hey, just so you know, I'm not wearing...
The moment I didn't walk into the room, it kicked the door off its hinges, tracked mud across the carpet, and knocked over every carefully stacked talking point on its way. In 1 minute, the political theater was humming along on its usual script of polished smiles and recycled outrage.
Gavin Newsom he just all around sucks.
Yeah.
He's just... you gotta be good at something.
Yeah. You got to be good at something.
You got to,
What is, there's not
clearly
one
the governor thing ain't his thing.
Yeah.
Telling the truth is tough. So maybe he was going to be a good comedian, because that's what happens to a lot of people. Acting doesn't work out, then they go into politics, and he's like, hey, I'll be a comedian. Turns out, sucks at that too. So I don't know. Maybe try carpentry. I don't know. But
before we move on, smash that like button and subscribe, because you don't want to miss out on this one. The next minute, Tyrus dropped a verbal spotlight so bright it made California's entire political weather system short circuit on live television. And suddenly, Gavin Newsom wasn't riding the wave of his carefully cultivated image anymore.
I want some of this, then you do some of this, and I'll do some of that back to you, and then we'll do this, and then I'll pay you, and then we'll do it again.
Yeah.
And then she kept saying, no. Okay, how about this? You do this one first, then we do this one, then we give a little back and forth.
He was paddling against a tidal surge of exposure, reactions, and a public response that shifted from polished to volcanic in record time. The fascinating part wasn't that uncomfortable information surfaced, because that happens daily in modern politics.
Speaking of full of I'm sorry, I'm confused. He's still governor, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So he could do something about it. That's the most irritating thing, is like, why did anyone say with a follow-up where he's like, the homeless situation is ridiculous? Follow-up question, aren't you the governor?
Yeah.
Like, that's the difference. That's the difference between the radical left and President Trump. He'll talk about something as it's...
The real spectacle was watching a man who thrives on control lose his grip on the narrative just long enough to remind everyone what raw irritation looks like when it slips past the PR filter. The eruption wasn't subtle, and it wasn't elegant. It was the kind of reaction that makes consultants choke on their coffee and start refreshing social media like day traders in a market crash. What made it even better was the contrast. On one side, you had Tyrus operating with the calm, almost lazy confidence of someone who knows the reaction will handle half the work for them. The audience wasn't passive, and the timing couldn't have been worse. They were dragged into the light with consequences attached. And once that happened, the usual trick of reshaping the story into something safer stopped working. The public could suddenly see the seams. Newsom's response unfolded in stages, almost like emotional levels in a boss fight. First came denial, disguised as dismissal, the political version of waving away a mosquito while insisting nothing is actually happening.
And then, look, he's blinking, and then eventually the camera guy, realizing that he's signaling him, so he gets appalled, leans back, camera comes down, and then we're back to this. I'll do this for you, you do this for me a little. So he's saying whatever he's going to say. There it is, see? They couldn't hold him back. He's like, I'm not on film. Oh, I'm not, nope. Bring my hands up, bring them up, bring them up, bring them up, bring them up. He's playing with us. Meet me at my house. You get mine. I get yours. It'll work out.
Then came defensive justification, where explanations stack up faster than they can be checked. Finally, there was the unmistakable edge of irritation, that sharp tone that tells you the buttons weren't just pressed, they were hit repeatedly with enthusiasm. What pushed the situation into a full spiral wasn't just the content, it was the speed. Clips shot across platforms like loose pinballs. Supporters scrambled to reshape the narrative. Critics sharpened their angles, but the internet had already made up its mind. This wasn't about calm corrections anymore. This had shifted into pure spectacle. It was the political ecosystem tripping over its own shoelaces in real time. And then came the body language. The slight shift in posture when control slips. The tightened jaw. The eyes searching a bit too aggressively. Analysts didn't need inside information. It was all there in the pacing, the stance, and the way the response felt less like leadership and more like emergency containment.
But his hand gestures match the words coming out of his mouth.
Right. Yes,
if the president was like, we want peace in the Middle East, you know what I'm saying? You would be like,
right,
and like,
That's it. That it is. It's the contrast.
yeah, like Gavin, his hands are aggressive. You know,
Yeah.
we've had a lot of theories. One, it was a bad negotiation with a deaf hooker. You know, now he doesn't want to pay for, you know.
Do you have a problem with deaf hookers?
He does, because
It's always a notable day when a polished political operator is forced out of script mode and shoved into reaction mode. Script mode is safe. Script mode is rehearsed. Script mode is where words are carefully shaped to satisfy focus groups and avoid upsetting donors on both coasts. Reaction mode, on the other hand, is where instinct appears without polish, and instinct, when irritated, rarely flatters. Tyrus didn't need to throw a single punch. The exposure itself acted like a pressure valve. Years of crafted storytelling, branding, and political choreography suddenly had to improvise under heat. Reaction channels doubled their posting speed. Everyone wanted a piece of it. Supporters rushed in with the kind of loyalty that resembles emergency triage. They explained, contextualized, reframed, and reassured everyone that none of this meant what it seemed to mean. Opponents, meanwhile, didn't hesitate. They didn't just analyze. They celebrated, stacking digital evidence like trophies on a virtual shelf, and hovering above everything was Newsom's reaction, still echoing through the cycle. every new defense only made the original eruption feel louder by contrast.
Days later,
Heard of everybody.
99%, no one's crossed. They're standing at the border like, you go. No, that, you go. Like, no one wants to go. Newsom goes down there and says, oh, there's a problem. This is what we saw this in New York when he put, what's his name, that Blasio, the guy you really hate?
Yeah, Bill de Blasio.
He put his wife in charge of the homeless, and there's $50 million still missing?
Yeah.
So this is another one of the left's money schemes where the guy who's in charge is saying, we need help, we need to figure out a way to do this. So they're gonna make a committee. They already have bubonic plague in California. I remember Dr. Drew was going, there's bubonic plague back in California.
It's one of the harsh realities of modern media. Once an emotional reaction is on record, every attempt to soften it only reminds people that the emotion happened in the first place. The irony is that political figures spend their entire careers trying to look unshakable, yet the moments that define them most often come when they visibly crack. Strategists were already arguing about whether to double down or pivot. The social media team was refreshing notifications so fast their screens were practically overheating. Somewhere, a crisis memo was being drafted and rewritten at the speed of regret. But the internet doesn't wait for memos. While professionals calibrated their responses, the crowd reacted instantly. Memes appeared within minutes. Because satire detects panic the way sharks detect blood. Edited clips slowed down key moments. Background music was added, and facial expressions were captured in screenshots destined to circulate longer than any official statement. And then came the follow-ups, because once a reaction leaks out of its container, it attracts questions. Questions that always bring scrutiny.
You know, we need to rethink everything, because the one thing about dementia or getting older, that the real you comes out. Mm-hmm. There's no more filters, the little Jiminy Cricket in your shoulder that says, don't say that, he died. So now it's just unfiltered. Mm-hmm. So now we have to go back. I think Corn Pop got a bad rap.
Yes.
Pretty sure Corn Pop's name was Cornelius.
Yes.
And Joe was trying to tell him how cool his hair is when it gets wet.
Scrutiny uncovers other moments, other statements, other decisions that suddenly feel newly relevant. The original exposure becomes less of a single spark and more of a doorway into a larger conversation that few people in power ever want. The most revealing part wasn't what Newsom said next. It was the shift in tone. The sharper edges softened, but not enough to erase the initial jolt. For years, Newsom has excelled at staying on offense, shaping discussions before critics can even load their arguments. But when exposure briefly flips that dynamic, the adjustment can look rough. The muscles trained for performance suddenly have to absorb impact, and impact was exactly what the audience wanted. Whether they leaned left, right, or simply leaned back with popcorn, they sensed it immediately. This wasn't a stage clash. This was genuine friction, and genuine friction carries a charge no prepared monologue can ever replicate.
I'm not paying money for that. I'll do it myself. So, you know.
A little bit of bubble.
Could you imagine if you were the sign person for the TV going...
You know what's interesting about him? I have maintained that Gavin Newsom has the easiest job of all politicians because California is a beautiful state.
Yeah.
At its baseline, people will stay there for the weather and the scenic elements. So they'll put up with anything, and they'll put up even with a governor who...
Tyrus, for his part, didn't need to push anything further. The spark had already lit up the room. In fact, the calmer he appeared beside the eruption, the sharper the imbalance looked. It created an asymmetry that made observers uneasy in a way they couldn't quite explain. One side moved with steady rhythm. The other pounded like a drum in a marching band that skipped rehearsal. The darkly amusing part was how predictable the aftermath became. Once the shock faded, trending tags rose and fell like shifting weather. Think pieces appeared overnight. Everyone became an expert on tone, timing, and temperament, but certain moments embedded themselves into public memory, not because of their scale, but because of the emotional exposure they revealed. This felt like one of those moments. From a strategic viewpoint, the eruption cost more than it delivered. Outrage rarely persuades skeptics, and it rarely reassures the undecided. It does something far worse. It exposes pressure.
I will not bring my kids back to my neighborhood because I don't feel like walking through, as you affectionately call, hobos, drug addicts and pedophiles and criminals who hide there because it's a great place to hide and commit crimes. So he could do something. He doesn't want to do something. He's just saying to see if American people are stupid enough to fall for his...
Yeah, you know what we used to call, gotta move on.
And once that pressure becomes visible, critics stop attacking the argument and start attacking the stability behind it. What unfolded in the days that followed was less dramatic, but far more revealing. Subtle shifts in messaging, small adjustments in emphasis, a quiet retreat from rhetorical positions that suddenly seemed too exposed. None of it was announced as a course correction, yet the changes were unmistakable to anyone paying attention. The comparison engines went wild, and at the core of everything sat a simple truth rarely acknowledged in polished political discourse. Power does not enjoy being questioned publicly. It tolerates critique in controlled settings. It tolerates opposition in structured debate. But exposure, especially when delivered in a way that resonates emotionally with viewers, feels like a personal intrusion. And personal intrusions trigger personal reactions. Newsom's eruption wasn't only about the content, it was about the breach. The invisible wall separating his curated image from unpredictable reality cracked just enough for people to peer inside. And once an audience gets even a brief look behind the curtain, they rarely forget it.
No, he would
because
not do that. He would not do that because that's just straight up honest racism. That's no. That's
Remember, he
some
did
shit
that.
would say.
He did that.
He
about
would do it in a way where he would tell a story about the founding fathers and how they built this country so when immigrants could come from India and build 7-Elevens.
Yes, so that's what he would do.
And hand him Slurpees in the summertime.
Yes.
Overpriced, of course. That's how he'll do it. And he'll say, and then he'll tell Vivek.
In the long run, the political machine will likely absorb this moment the same way it absorbs nearly everything through time, distraction, and an ever-growing stream of new controversies. But the short-term impact is undeniable. The conversation shifted, the posture changed, and the confidence took a noticeable hit. For viewers, it became less about who was correct and more about who appeared shaken. And in the arena of public perception, being rattled is often judged more harshly than being wrong. wrong. As weeks pass, the eruption will be mentioned casually, in clips, in quick jokes, in offhand comments paired with raised eyebrows. It will turn into shorthand. Others will reinterpret it as a calculated exchange. Most will simply remember the sensation of watching composure slip into irritation in real time, because no matter how many explanations surround it later, that first crack is what people replay. And somewhere within the political machinery, the lesson will be quietly recorded.
He's lying and I can't do that. Well, since you can't lie, what tequila were you nursing while the Pacific Palisades burned? And what was it like banging your campaign manager's wife? Of course, he's just waiting for us to forget that his state looks like an overturned porta potty.
So what their problem is not that what he says is that anyone from any walk of life understands his message.
And that's scary.
And that is suck.
Not announced, not acknowledged, but remembered. Exposure doesn't need to be loud to be effective. Sometimes it only needs to provoke the right reaction. In this case, the reaction delivered its own message. It signaled that the pressure was real, that the moment carried weight, and that the careful balance between image and reality shook just enough for everyone to notice. The irony is that politics depends on performance, yet the moments that resonate most are almost always the unscripted ones. Because in the end, this wasn't just about one exposure or one eruption. It was a reminder the audience never grows tired of. Behind every polished speech and curated persona sits a human reaction waiting for the wrong moment to break free. And when it does, no amount of messaging can fully contain it again. Once that reaction escapes, it becomes a reference point, a quiet mark on the timeline that commentators return to whenever composure becomes part of the conversation again.
And then look at the audience and be like, what?
Yeah.
What did I say here? No one likes him and his family. Because at some point, if you had any love from anybody, they'd be enough. If he was a boxer, you hug him, you put the towel over his head and be like, we're going home, man.
Yeah.
We're going home. We're done here. But
Yeah.
he couldn't even read LL.
Yeah.
Could I add something very quickly here? Obviously, Newsom is jockeying for presidential position because he has agreed to debate Ron DeSantis on this network.
Yes.
Every future display of calm will be measured against that flash of irritation. Every carefully shaped statement will carry the faint echo of that earlier outburst, like a hairline crack beneath a new coat of paint. The audience will move on to the next spectacle because the news cycle always demands fresh drama, but memory sticks in strange ways. It doesn't cling to data, it clings to moments. The contrast between the image meant to dominate and the reaction that briefly disrupted it. That contrast sharpens over time, turning into a quiet benchmark that never fully disappears. Long after the headlines drift elsewhere, the clip will keep circulating in corners of the internet, resurfacing whenever pressure and power collide again. Because that is the true aftershock of an eruption like this. Not the initial noise, but the lasting reminder that control, no matter how carefully crafted, is always one unexpected spark away from slipping.